Well, thank you all so much for joining this evening and for sharing where you're joining us from. Um, we'll want to welcome you all uh, to the event this evening. Today, we're really here to we want to make sense of the costs related to caregiving. My name is Antron Watson. I'm with the ARP Massachusetts State Office. This webinar is a part of our caregiving series. So you can find these and um, other offerings at the ARP Virtual Community Center at arp.org/VCC. Maybe that's where you found this one today. But there's lots of great offerings there on a regular basis from both here in Massachusetts and nationwide. But as you already may know, ARP maintains a deep focus on the health, financial security, and personal fulfillment of people 50 and over and their families. And you'll find that reflected in our offerings and resources and in our advocacy work. As you already also may already know, ARP is advocating for the issues that affect you most. We're fighting to protect your hard-earned Medicare Social Security benefits, and we're urging Congress to lower prescription drug prices, stop scams, and shut down fraud. And most importantly, ARP is really fighting to support our family caregivers. One of our biggest goals is to really empower you with the knowledge and confidence, whether you are already in a caregiving role or preparing for the future responsibilities. Together, we can ensure that our loved ones are cared for with the utmost respect and financial security. To stay up to date with all of our events, our wins, our calls to actions, you can always go, if you're local here in Massachusetts, you can go to arp.org/MA. If you aren't in Massachusetts, to find your local page, you can always go to aarp.org/local. This will help you stay informed of what's happening locally to you, as well as nationwide. So as you think about questions this evening that you may want to ask, please use the Q&A feature across the bottom of the screen. We'll be monitoring that along the way. If you just want to share or share comments, please use the chat feature. We'll be trying to monitor. We'll keep an eye on the chat throughout the presentation today. As you may already know, this is being recorded. So if for some reason you have to leave, step out, you will receive a copy of the recording in the next couple of days, as well as a survey to let us know how we did. What information is pertinent to you and what programming can we continue to offer down the road. I have said so much in this first 3 minutes of this presentation that I'm going to now take a back seat and turn it over to my partner here, Renee Sinez, who will take us through this presentation. Over to you, Renee.
Thank you so much, Antron, and welcome to our presentation on making sense of caregiving. So Antron, if you'd like to bring up the slides. There we go. Thank you. So as you must already know, caring for a loved one isn't always easy. In this session, we're going to introduce you to some of the essential information caregivers need to manage the complex responsibility of caregiving more easily. It's our hope that it will be educational and informative, and that you'll leave here today with more confidence in making your own plan, as well as a better understanding of how to plan for your care recipient. Next, please. Please remember that this presentation is intended to provide general guidance, not specific legal or financial advice. Your individual circumstances may differ and should be taken into consideration. I can't provide specific advice or recommendations, but hopefully the information we cover today will help you make informed decisions about your financial future. Be sure to consult a professional for advice regarding your personal situation. Okay, let's move on to slide 3. Being a caregiver is a labor of love that comes with a lot of responsibilities. While it's hard to put a price on caring, it also comes with some real out-of-pocket costs for you. You may be picking up groceries, helping with housework, making trips to the doctor or pharmacy. All those little things add up. Having a clear picture of what's involved, whether it's your care recipient's health, housing, or finances, lets you plan ahead. AARP has developed a financial workbook for family caregivers. This workbook is designed to help you focus on the financial aspects of your caregiving journey. You probably don't have this in front of you, but I am going to be talking about it. And please note, you will have the option of receiving a copy at the end of this seminar, either through an email that you will receive or instructions about how to download one on AARP's website. So we hope that these tools will help you feel better prepared. Note that we use the terms care recipient and loved one interchangeably throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. We're going to talk about how to use this financial workbook. We'll also talk about how to incorporate practical financial tips into your caregiving, and we'll add resources to assist you with your caregiving. A few ground rules, please. Please remember to keep your microphone on mute. This is a public forum, so please do not share personally identifying information. As Antron said, use the Q&A to ask questions. I'll stop at the end of every section to see if you have questions before we continue. And remember, this is a judgment-free zone. Next slide, please. Did you know that family caregivers are thought of as an invisible army? But without adequate support, they remain vulnerable to financial and job-related hardships, as well as emotional stress. So let's look at some of the out-of-pocket costs associated with caregiving. In 2021, family caregivers spent $7,242 on caregiving expenses, such as transportation and home modifications on average. Given inflation, we know that number by now has gone up. Next, please. And according to AARP's report, Caregiving in the US, an estimated 48 million family members provided 34 billion hours of unpaid care to adult loved ones. So what does this mean? Next, please. It adds up to $470 billion in unpaid care. Next, please. So what does all that money get spent on? More than 3 out of 4 caregivers incurred some or all of these out-of-pocket costs. Why did family caregivers incur these expenses? Love, yes, certainly, but also because professional home care costs more. There's a company out there called Genworth, and you can just Google them online and find out that they do a lot of surveys about in-home costs because Genworth is a company that sells long-term care insurance. In 2024, they estimated the average monthly cost for homemaker services. We're not talking about professional home care. We're talking about homemaker services, things like light housekeeping, meal preparation, running errands, at more than $7,000 a month. The cost for a home health aide, someone with medical training who can assist with bathing or more personal needs, were about $4,000 more a month, adding up to over $80,000 a year. I'm in the Boston area, where home care ranges from $37 an hour to $39 per hour. Assisted living costs are about $6,750 a month, or over $81,000 a year. And nursing home care is $465 to $505 per day, or over $170,000 per year. Take a look at what the costs are in your area. Again, if you Google Genworth, they have this really nice calculator that will allow you to put in your address and look at all of these home health care costs. So strictly from a financial perspective, it's more cost-effective to provide care for a loved one yourself rather than hiring a professional. And as we go through things tonight, I'm going to tell you stories about my mom. My mom passed away at the end of 2022. She was 97. And for the past 3 years of her life, she had full-time in-home care with the wonderful, beloved Felicia. So I will tell you all about Felicia and Mom. I didn't personally care for Mom, but I handled all of the finances. So I'll tell you about that as well. Slide 9, please. There's a financial impact to providing care on you as the caregiver. Many caregivers dip into their own retirement savings to help pay caregiving costs. Many spend less on their own health care in order to help out. and more than a third cut back on personal spending to get the extra money they need to pay for a loved one's care. Next, please. About 3 in 5 caregivers, almost 24 million people, have a paying job in addition to their caregiving responsibilities. But more than half of family caregivers have to take time off from their main job, reduce hours at work, or even quit their jobs altogether in order to accommodate their responsibilities. This can mean diminished chances for promotions, less job security, fewer employment benefits, reduced money set aside for their own retirement, and lower Social Security benefits for themselves when the time comes. I'm going to read you a little section from a 2023 article in Investment News, and it says how caregiving costs women their their retirement security. For most women, caregiving and saving for retirement are on a head-on collision. The National Partnership for Women and Families reports that a woman in her 50s, today's Gen Xers, who gives up a career for elder care, gives up $324,000 in earnings and savings. Elder caregiving often erupts unexpectedly and is unaccompanied by workplace benefits or structured support for caregivers. The retirements of midlife women are caregiving collateral damage. That's a pretty strong statement, caregiving collateral damage. So as you think about your role as a caregiver, think about this, that more than a third cut back on personal spending and on their own retirement. Next slide, please. So what can you do to safeguard your future and finances? Plan. And that brings us to the bulk of today's discussion, the financial workbook that we're going to be going through. The first page of the guide says it all. Dear Family Caregiver. The guide was designed to help you on your caregiving journey. It was created by AARP and Jessica Allen, a caregiver for her husband who was injured in active duty in the military. Jessica was also an accredited financial advisor. We recognize the toll caregiving can take, so we've set up a bunch of tools to help you. First, the cost of caregiving, as we've discussed, is high. Most families spend close to $8,000 per year caring for a loved one. So please take note of our piggy bank symbol throughout the guide. We've added these so you could specifically point out tips that could assist you. Second, every caregiving journey is unique. There's no one size fits all. Your journey is yours, and there are no right answers, just your answers. You may be able to finish this guide in a day, or it may take several days, or it may take several months. Whatever works for you is what works best. The presentation will simply hit on the highlights and in the hopes of helping you complete the guide at your own pace. Finally, and this is obviously a sensitive subject, we know that caregiving can be stressful, especially over long periods of time. Remember, it's just as important to take care of yourself, both your physical and mental health, as it is to look after your loved one. So please do that for yourself, for the person that you're caring for, and for all of the people that care about you. Next one, please. Before we dive into the guide, I'd like to play a clip for you from a Facebook Live session we did with the author of both the guide for this general guide that we're sharing with you and the guide for military families. Jessica Allen will explain the importance of this guide, especially if caregiving is suddenly thrust upon you, as it was when her husband was injured on active duty, and how you can help someone provide you with a break from caregiving, also known as respite. Video, please.
If you had a guide like this, you could start working on these things. You don't have to complete it all in one session, but the way we set the guide up is where you could come in and say, okay, today I'm going to work on this section. And then tomorrow, while you have that time, you can. And then before you know it, it's done. But the most important part about this guide was if something happens and you have to step away, you go on vacation, you take some respite, maybe you're sick, you can give this guide to someone to step in for you. And it's going to tell them, hey, his, powers of attorney are located here. Hey, his care team is here. This is the doctor so-and-so does this. Oh, I'm out of colostomy bags. This is who I contact for that. Like, that's the whole purpose of this guide, is so you can pass it off and breathe. for just a minute. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
may take you a while, but it's worth it in the end.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Today, we're going to provide financial tips within 4 categories: health, housing, money, and the future. And as I said, I will stop at the end of each category for questions. So please put your questions in the question and answer section. And remember, as I said, personal finance is called personal for a reason. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. The guide is designed to help you prepare your caregiver financial life in more specific detail. After you complete the guide, it can be a key resource to equip someone to step in and assist your care recipient in the event of your absence. Also, we strongly suggest you seek assistance from professionals. For example, once you complete your power of attorney, will, and burial plans, you should seek the guidance of an attorney. Once you list your debts, perhaps you should seek an accredited financial counselor to help you with debt management. The guide is designed to help you through this process, not replace trusted financial advice. Next slide. First up, we're going to walk through the health section, where we're going to begin documenting plans for the health of your loved one. We'll cover a wide range of topics, including health, sickness, and even death. These topics can be very difficult to discuss, but it's vital to make the right plans for yourself and those you provide care for. Before you begin filling out each section, you'll want to take some time to gather your key information. For example, before completing the healthcare section, you'll want to collect all of the contact information for your care recipients, doctors, hospitals, and pharmacies. Next slide, please. Let's start with your healthcare plan. When you do have the guide, you'll find that this section begins on page 4. You'll want to answer some very important questions about the care your loved one receives. First, from whom do they receive care? Do they use Medicare? If they're a veteran, what about VA? What about private insurance? There are so many possibilities for healthcare coverage. Make sure you take the time to understand not only who the insurer is, but learn about the caps, the copays, the deductibles, and perhaps most importantly, the coverage. On the next page of the guide, you'll list health issues, medications, and accommodations. This page can be extremely helpful at any and all doctor's appointments and hospital visits. So as I said, my mom had the wonderful Felicia. I'm here in Massachusetts. Mom chose to continue her life in Florida. So it was Felicia who went to the doctor with her, Felicia who went to the hospital with her, and Felicia who reported back to me and shared information with me. So she was the one who needed to have all of this information in addition to me. Emergency contacts are a must for any caregiver who can step in for you with little notice. Hopefully you have more than one person who can jump in. What other details can you add to this page to help medical staff with your care recipient? Does your care recipient have allergies? Do they have difficulty hearing or seeing? Do they live with memory loss or dementia? If you filled in the accommodation area above, add those details as well. Next page, please. As a caregiver, oftentimes you may feel alone, but you're not. Make caregiving a team sport. In this section, you'll document all the necessary contact information, such as names, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, and websites. Your care recipient's care team should know you and should consider you, the caregiver, as a valuable team player. You can provide medical information with crucial information that can make a big difference in treatment, and you can often provide care details that the care recipient forgot or didn't notice. You might also want to check in your state or the state where your loved one resides and gets medical care if they've passed the CARE Act. The CARE Act makes sure caregivers are recognized when their loved ones go to the hospital, notified when the patient will be released, and given the instructions they need for continued care before their loved one returns home. You can even go to aarp.org/wallet card to download your free CARE Act wallet card for yourself and your loved ones. The card contains information on the CARE Act in your state. Fold the card, wrap it around the insurance card, and place them in your wallet. And here again, Mom had listed me as her contact if anything were to happen to her or she needed to go to the hospital. And there I was one day driving to an appointment here in Massachusetts when I got a phone call telling me that mom had pressed her emergency, her emergency button, and they were transporting her to the hospital. However, once again, here I was in Massachusetts. So we learned that the emergency contact needed to be Felicia, who was nearby and living in Florida, and that I was the secondary contact. Next contact, please. Think about the other members of your health team. Do health aides visit your home? Do you have a secondary caregiver that steps in so you can take a break? Who can step in with short notice? Are you a member of a church or a community-based club? Could a member of one of those organizations assist you? Do you have someone to chat with from time to time about the stresses of being a caregiver? You can list any and all of these people in this section of the guide. We'll provide you with some resources that can assist you later in the presentation, but I'd like to mention two things that can really help when you need to take a break. The first is respite care, which is a short break from regular caregiving duties. As we've said, caring for a loved one can be stressful, and it can have real consequences on your physical and mental health. In 2015, a national caregiving survey by AARP found that 85% of caregivers said they would find respite care helpful. Sadly, access is limited by location, income, and the health condition of your loved ones. One of the links we'll give you later will contain information that might help you find respite care in your area. The second is adult daycare programs that can provide caregivers with a needed break while giving older adults a chance to socialize. The programs they provide and the cost associated with them can vary, but your local area or agency, in my area, it's called the Council on Aging, can help you find some adult daycare programs, and we will again give you some links. So before we move on to our next slide, next slide, please, actually. Okay, we're going to do this before we stop and take questions. So the power of attorney, a power of attorney is a very, very important document. It's a signed document in which one person A appoints person B to act on their behalf. Powers of attorney are sometimes limited to a particular purpose or period. Other times they're general. And state laws on power of attorneys do vary, so know what the law is wherever you and your care recipients reside. Please keep in mind that the guide only provides a power of attorney worksheet. You can fill out these pages, but it's not a power of attorney. Once you've finished it, you need to seek out a legal professional who will help you complete the document. They must be notarized in order for them to be binding. And also important to note that many financial institutions and medical treatment facilities require their own powers of attorney. So you should also know that generalized powers of attorney are not as widely accepted as they have been in the past. It is at the discretion of every financial or medical institution, or even a business, to determine what power of attorney they will accept when doing business. You can have different powers of attorney for different financial or healthcare issues. You can name multiple people to act for you or just one. You can also name successors so that if one person can't serve, a successor power of attorney can step in and serve in their place. Even though you can also fill out at this point a power of attorney for yourself. So even though they're the same questions, take the time to answer them for both you and your care recipient separately. If your care recipient is capable of participating, you want to make sure that you understand who they would want to appoint. Now, one important point here is that in order to complete a power of attorney and have an attorney willing to notarize it, you have to be mentally competent. So if you are caring for someone who is no longer capable of decision making, you're not going to be able to get a power of attorney. That's why it's important to do this as soon as you can before your care recipient or you decline. Where you keep your power of attorney is also vital. We suggest you keep the original somewhere that can be protected from fire, theft, flood, or other damage. My favorite place is to keep it with the attorney who drafted the document for you. Keep a copy of it in a safe place, and just make sure you note that the original, note in your caregiver workbook that the original is with the attorney. Some people acquire safe deposit box at their banks. Those can be entirely tricky because somebody has to have access to that safe deposit box and have a key and be designated through the bank as having access. Otherwise, you're ending up in probate court. So where you choose to keep this is entirely up to you. Just make sure that the designee, the person who you have named to serve on your behalf, knows where to find the original. Next one, please. So moving on from power attorney, we get to a will and to estate planning. This is a very sensitive topic and it can be very emotional, but it's also very important. These pages become your voice after passing. The people reading these pages will be grieving your loss, but the information you provide can actually help them with their grief. If you take the time to list out what you want to have happen, it takes the guesswork out of it. It can greatly reduce stress levels during a very difficult time. Just like the power of attorney, these questions need to be applied to the caregiver and the care recipient separately. You might be thinking to yourself that you don't have an estate. However, every one of us has an estate, some bank accounts, a pet, some material goods, a car. Once you pass, someone has to settle all of those things for you. So take the time to help them know what it is you'd like them to do. If you have minor children, you'll definitely want to complete a will and or have a will in place as soon as possible. Remember, just like a power of attorney, these pages are not binding. While some courts might take them into consideration, these completed pages are not a binding legal document. It's in the best interest to consult with a professional to have a power of attorney and a will drafted. Most law firms will do this as a package. They will do a will, a power of attorney, and a healthcare proxy as one packaged estate planning document. Next slide, please. And another very difficult topic, and so important to make sure your final wishes are known in document. This is likely to be a tumultuous time for your loved one, and providing an interment plan will help ensure your wishes are carried out and spare someone else for having to make those difficult decisions. We've only included one page in the guide for your care recipient, but there's plenty of space to add your wishes as well. To ensure your end of the life plans are carried out, visit with a funeral home and let your attorney know. They can suggest additional resources to help you complete this process. End of life costs are an important thing to consider too when deciding on your burial plans. Do you have enough in savings to cover your burial plans? If not, do you have life insurance that can cover these costs? Do not leave the expenses to your loved ones. Plan ahead so they can focus on grieving and settling your cares. I was blessed to have mom who had taken this advice to heart, and she had prepaid her funeral. And when the time came, as I said, mom lived in Florida, and I had gone ahead and contacted as she got considerably more infirm. I had gone ahead and contacted the funeral home. They gave me a step-by-step list of what to do, who to call first, and it was not the funeral home. In fact, what they told me, at least in Florida, was that if mom died at home, the first person that Felicia needed to call was the police. And she had to report the death and have the police come over and certify it. And from there, they could call the funeral home. And then mom had died in Florida, but the funeral and the burial were in New York, where both she and I had grown up. And because she had prepaid everything, the funeral home in Florida took care of all of the transportation to New York, connecting us with a funeral home in New York, who then provided a graveside service. And I have to tell you, it was seamless. The most difficult thing I had to do was get my daughter home from Vermont and get my son home on leave from the military. And that was difficult enough, and get everybody to New York. But because mom had done all of this, she really had taken care of all the arrangements and everything was handled for us. So I can't say enough about doing the work and discussing prepaid funeral plans. All right, next topic, please. Next slide, please. So before we move on to housing, Antron, would you check and see if we have any questions that people would like to have asked about the sections we've just covered?
Yeah, you covered a lot there in that
I
initial
know.
section. So one of the questions that did come in was, what happens if a care recipient can no longer create a power of attorney?
Can no longer,
Create a power of attorney.
you're fading out on me, Antron.
Create a power of attorney?
Yeah, so unfortunately, if you can't create a power of attorney, what you're looking at is, and again, this is going to vary state by state. I can only tell you Massachusetts, but what you're looking at is a probate court guardianship. And a court guardianship gives you the right to speak for somebody else if they are no longer capable of creating a power of attorney. Don't just assume that someone can't do a power of attorney. That's truly a legal question. But, if your doctor's telling you or you're noticing that somebody really is not competent to make those kinds of plans, you're looking at talking with an elder law attorney, probably about a guardianship.
Awesome. And that was the only question we had so far.
All right, so let's move on to talking about housing. Phew, we've gone through the really tough stuff, the will, the power of attorney, and death and interment plans. So housing is a lot easier to talk about. Let's move on. We're going to start with issues related to housing and life at home for your care recipient. We'll also discuss transportation, which is something incredibly important to think about, and enabling your care recipient to stay in their home and community for as long as they choose. We'll also talk about diet and allergies, and then we are going to rifle through the filing cabinet. Next slide, please. This section is intended to help you and your loved one get their home in order. If you live separately from your care recipient, you might want to take the time to fill out these pages for yourself as well. Make sure you list due dates, amounts due, where the payments go, and all other vital information. You don't want to miss or be late on a payment, so make sure you do this for all bills related to your care recipient remaining in their home: the mortgage or the rent, the homeowners and the rental insurance, the property taxes, and all of the household utilities. Budget building is available through most utility companies and should be used when possible. Companies use different terms for budget billing. They could call it bill averaging or range or other terms, but essentially what the company does is they take the 12 months of payment and they take an average and spread it out over the 12 months so that you're not getting a very high bill in the winter and a lower bill in the summer, or vice versa if you live somewhere where you're using lots of air conditioning. Once a year, the company will recalculate your bill and adjust it accordingly. Also, don't be afraid to ask for discounts. There might be military discounts and discounts for being associated with an organization like AARP or some other organization you belong to. Check if your state has a tax-free or reduced property tax exclusion for your care recipient. That can save you significant amount of dollars. And remember to ask for discounts on your homeowners or rental insurance policies. My mom put all of her bills on auto pay. However, what we discovered was because Felicia did some of them and I did others, we had debited them from different accounts. We had some bills coming from her checking account, some bills coming from her savings account, and some bills coming from her credit card. Made it a little bit more difficult to clean up after she had passed. So my suggestion is to you, if you're going to do auto pay, consolidate. Make sure that online access and current cell phone numbers are correct for two-step verifications. Some of them were on two-step verification for my mom for a cell phone that she no longer had access to and no longer used. So just watch that one. Online auto pay works really well. Just make sure that you do it properly. Next slide, please. Access to transportation can be an important factor in your care recipient remaining in their home. Can your care recipient still own, operate, and/or drive a vehicle? If so, use these pages to list all of the information needed to own and operate a vehicle in your area. If you are the only driver, use these pages to help fill out the information for yourself. Make sure you check with your local county clerk's office to see if your care recipient is eligible for any discounts or tax exclusions. And for example, Purple Heart recipients in the state of Tennessee receive free license plates. So anything you can do to save money here is important for you to check into. Also ask for discounts on your vehicle insurance and public transportation. It turned out after my mom stopped driving, thankfully, she chose to do that on her own without anybody having to take the keys away. Felicia was driving mom's car. And we found that it was more beneficial to have Felicia on mom's insurance rather than trust that Felicia's own insurance would step in and take care if anything happened. So make sure you know who's driving the car as the major or primary driver and have them on the car insurance. Next slide. Do you or does your care recipient have a special diet? Do either of you have any food allergies? Use this page to help list those. This page can also serve as a shopping list, especially if you have dietary items you need to buy every week. Does your loved one need an EpiPen? You'll want to list the expiration date for that EpiPen. So anything that you need here in a special equipment category or that somebody needs to take note of, please see. And I see there's a question coming in about a video, Antron. You just want to take a check? Somebody needs to leave. Antron? So there was a question coming in about access to a video. Somebody needed to leave early.
Yeah, we are recording it and they'll get the recording after following up.
Okay. So next slide, please. So keeping documents secure is a necessity, and to do that, you might consider getting a home safe. The contents of every safe will look different. We all have different vital documents. This is a list here to simply help you get started. You can always add different types of documents to your own list, and some of the documents listed may not be relevant to you. If you don't have a safe and need to purchase one, make sure it's able to withstand a fire and make sure the safe locks and put the key in a secure location. And please remember where you put it. You might even consider getting a safe with 2 keys and keep each set in a separate household. Make sure you use the lock. Locking the safe provides one more level of protection from identity theft. And as I said, my preference with things like a will, a healthcare proxy, and a power of attorney is to leave the original with the attorney. Next slide, please. Like the safe contents list, there is also a file contents list intended to help you get started organizing your files. Consider placing your files in a locked filing cabinet to help reduce the chances of identity theft occurring in your home and to protect them from accidental damage. And again, remember where you put the key or keys if you get one. One of the things I did on one of my visits to mom, back when mom was still mentally engaged, is she and I went to Staples together and we bought a whole set of manila file folders and hanging files. And mom was kind of like, Renee, why are we doing this? Why do I need all of this? But I got her set up with files for each of her bank accounts, each of her credit cards, and I showed her how to maintain them. And later on, Felicia maintained them so that when the mail came and a bank statement came or a brokerage statement came or her home insurance documents came, they were easily filed and easily found. And as mom, got a little less mentally with it, one of the things we found she loved to do was to shred documents. So I could file documents, or Felicia could, while mom shredded. And it made it actually a very enjoyable activity for everybody. Next slide, please. So before we move on to money, any questions for the section that we just did? All right.
Questions at this time?
All right, then I'm going to move on and we will talk about money. One of the most important responsibilities as a caregiver is planning and managing money, both your own and your care recipients. Home is where most of us spend the majority of our time, and it's important to make your home a low-stress environment. Though difficult, discussing money doesn't have to be stressful. By taking the time to make your dollars work for you and your care recipient, you can create peace of mind that will help you make your time at home more enjoyable. In this section, we're going to discuss budgets, investments, and debts. Next slide, please. The first budget page is for you, the caregiver. If you're married to your care recipient, you'll probably want to combine your budgets. It's vital that you give every dollar in your home a name. Tracking your dollars actually enables you to control your money. Our page is probably not big enough to list every single dollar, so you can group your expenses in the categories provided. Anything that doesn't fit into the lines exactly can simply be added to the discretionary category. However, if you want to be more precise, take the time to list your expenses out individually on a separate piece of paper. There's not one way of budgeting that works for everyone. You might like using a pen and paper. Someone else might like an app you have on your phone. You could also set up a spreadsheet or an Excel sheet, or use one of the many budgeting websites that are available. The point of all of this is to achieve what's called a zero-based budget. That means you have $0 left after you give every dollar a name. So we have a college savings line on our form. If you don't need to save for college, scratch that out and make it a savings line. Make this budget about you. AARP offers a free online tool to help you set up your budget using the AARP Home Budget Calculator. Next slide, please. We've added a caregiving budget because we realize that there are specific expenses related to caregiving. Caregivers spend thousands of dollars per year caring for others. Take the time to list out your caregiving expenses separately from the budget you've put together for your personal finances. We also have a sheet to prepare a budget for your care recipient. Remember, unless your care recipient is your spouse and you've done a combined budget, this budget is different than the one you filled out for yourself. Apply the same thoughts from your budget to your care recipient's budget. If at all possible, the care recipient should be involved in the budgeting process. Next slide. Investments can be tricky. You need to not only have money to invest, but you also need to decide your risk tolerance to investing so you can determine where to place your money. This is where a financial professional comes in. Spend some time researching investment companies and decide which one is best for you. Make sure you ask about their fees and commissions. Find out if they will be acting as a fiduciary, someone who manages money or other assets for another person. It should go without saying, but you'll want to be sure that you're making more money than you pay out in fees and other costs. The AARP Interview and Advisor tool is a free resource to help you understand a financial advisor's credentials, compensation, and tips, and how to get the conversation started around your needs. The tool is available for a smartphone, a tablet, or a computer. And this is where, too, if you do have a brokerage firm that's involved with you or your care recipient, please do check and find out what their power of attorney form looks like. You'll want to know that you've got that on file, as well as the power of attorney that you have prepared by your attorney. Next slide. Our debt page provides you with a simple template so you can begin organizing your debts to create a get out of debt action plan. Being in debt's not a bad thing. Most Americans must make payments for a house, a car, student loans, and credit cards. The problem isn't the debt. The problem is the interest rate. The original debt you started out with can easily double or triple if you're not careful. The debt system in America favors the creditor, not you, the consumer. Being debt-free can offer you some additional financial freedom and peace. There are numerous ways to eliminate debt. Most financial experts recommend organizing your debts from the smallest to the greatest balance. You can pay the minimum payments on the bigger debt and take your available dollars to eliminate your smallest debt. As you knock out the smaller debts, you'll feel empowered to attack the next smallest. Sometimes we need professional assistance with organizing our debts. Your bank may have someone who can assist you, or you can search for an accredited financial counselor known as an AFC. Many AFCs can even meet with you online or on the phone, so don't be afraid to ask for help. For additional financial strategies customized to your situation, check out AARP Money Map. Next slide, please. Let's turn to something that's important to you, the loved one you care for, and everyone in your family, the future. What does your future look like and what are your goals? Do you need additional education to achieve your goals? Do you have a retirement plan? Do you need to save more for retirement? How might your caregiving responsibilities affect your plans? It's important for you to thoughtfully consider all of these questions and to speak with your care recipient about what they want for their future as well. Use the financial information from the financial section to evaluate your options. We've included a page for the caregiver as well as for the care recipient. These plans could be similar or they could be vastly different. Next slide, please. Please take the time to check out our resources and key terms page. We have listed some amazing nonprofit organizations and governmental agencies that can assist you and your care recipient, as well as some terms you may encounter while acting as a caregiver. We've also got a place where you can jot down some additional notes if that is helpful to you. Next page, please. And speaking of resources, we want to give you just a few before we wrap up. These will be available to you after the presentation. And if you'd like to share it with a friend, both are available online and a PDF version that's easy to download so that you can fill it in right there on the screen if you like before you download. Next slide, please. AARP has many resources that are available to help you. You'll find them in the back of the workbook. We also have a caregiving resource center and a family caregiver support line, both in English and Spanish. Our Prepare to Care guide is available online as well. It's another fantastic resource you can use as you approach becoming a caregiver. And it becomes in several different versions because each caregiving journey for you and your loved one is unique. If you're interested, you're welcome to join AARP's Family Caregivers discussion group on Facebook to get support during your family caregiver journey. And you don't need to be an AARP member to join, although we'd love to have you as a member. Finally, and this is obviously a sensitive subject, as we've discussed, caregiving can be stressful, especially over long periods of time. So we've included the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline listed. The Lifeline has staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year to talk to and support you if things are getting too difficult and you feel overwhelmed. If you're having suicidal thoughts or thinking of hurting yourself or the person you're caring for, please do reach out. Make a note of the number on this page and have it accessible for yourself and your loved ones. Next slide, please. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and got some resources you can use, and thank you for being here today. We've reviewed financial care tips for caregivers within 4 categories: health, housing, money, and the future. We've also shared several additional resources to support you in your caregiving journey. We hope you stay connected with AARP and some other AARP online learning activities, such as webinars on Medicare, Social Security, family caregiving, fraud prevention, work, jobs, and more. We also provide lots of AARP opportunities to connect with your community and provide watch parties, coffee chats, exercise classes. You can visit aarp.org/nearyou. So I'm going to turn it back to Antron and open this up to questions. Anything that people would like to ask as we continue with our presentation.
Another question that came in, Renee. Is there a ratio to budgeting that you might suggest?
So a ratio, I'm thinking you're talking about income versus expenses. So I think, yes, okay, income versus expenses. So I don't have any, but the ones I've seen, if you look online, you'll say they look at your housing expenses should be about 30% of your income. I think it's more important really that you understand, rather than a ratio, that you understand what's called your net income is. How much money do you actually have to live on? What comes home with you? And then I look at what my expenses are, and I start with what are called my fixed expenses. Fixed expenses are your housing, your healthcare, your food, or fixed versus discretionary, those things you need versus those things you want. And after you've done all of your fixed expenses, whatever's left over is the stuff you have to save or to do the fun stuff with. So I like to work it backwards. How much money's coming home, take off housing, food, clothing, insurance, transportation, and then look at what's left, and that can get allocated to everything else.
I was just wondering if you could share a little bit more about your experience with when you received that emergency call for your mother at the time, where you were in Massachusetts, she was in Florida, and that experience.
So I was driving, for those of you who are in Massachusetts, I was driving on Route 9 in rush hour, which is not a pleasant place to be to begin with. A little bit hair raising. And the phone rang, and this man said, is this Renee? And I said, yes. And they said, what is this in reference to? And he said, I'm just calling to let you know we've taken your mother to the hospital. And, of course, I'm trying to figure out if I can get off the highway and pull over so I can take some notes and ask some reasonable questions. And I said, where are you taking her? And he said, the hospital. And I said, what hospital? He said, the one nearby. And I said, wait a minute, I don't know what nearby is. I'm in Massachusetts. She's in Florida. How do I find my mother? So I have to say it was not a pleasant experience. And I did, in fact, call the company and talk with them about it later on. But it, like I said, it made me realize that there are steps that needed to be taken to ensure that the next time this happened, that the person that got contacted was Felicia, who could go over to the hospital. And it took me the better part of, I'd say, 8 hours to find my mom, in terms of, where they had taken her, where they had admitted her, find a nurse who could talk to me, let me know that she was staying overnight. So no, it was a very frightening experience.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Actually, one of our participants shared a similar story where they said they were able to contact the police because it was a very similar situation where they weren't told which hospital, but I think, were able to contact the police to get a better idea of the full synopsis of the situation where the person was going.
Good to know. Thank you for that suggestion. Wish I'd known that at the time.
Thank you. Well, I think that's it for questions.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us and participating. And you will have, I think, a copy of the recording. I'll let Antron kind of conclude things for us, and a copy of the workbook.
Yes, thank you all again for joining us this evening. As Renee said, following this presentation, I'd say within the next day or so, you should receive an email with a link to the recording of today's presentation, as well as several of the links that were included in Renee's slides this evening. In addition to that, in that email, you'll also see a link to a survey. Again, just so we can continue to improve these presentations, we'd love your feedback. We want to know what's good, what's bad, where can we dive in a little bit deeper to be more helpful to you as we address these difficult subjects and really prepare for the future. So with that, on behalf of AARP, specifically AARP Massachusetts, I want to thank Renee for a wonderful presentation this evening, informative presentation. And thank you all for taking the time to join us this evening. And we hope to see you again in the future.